That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of PvA Radio. I am one of your hosts, Luke Croft. Joining me, as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellokline. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And then also, he will be donning the most realistic Fortnite costume of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Hunt.
I hate you so much.
This is so perfect. This is... Look, now, Larry, you've known me for how many years now?
8?
Like
9?
8? No, it's almost been a decade. You met me when I was 18. You met me my freshman year of college.
And now you're about to turn 33.
I don't take joy in the downfall of others, do I? I don't bask in the glory of other people's misery. That doesn't sound like me, does it?
I mean, that's you in a nutshell.
So the fact that you have worked for literal years to get this pumpkin head that you're about to get so that you could wear it with your David Pumpkin suit.
Yep.
Only for it to become a Fortnite skin mere weeks before you were going to realize this dream.
Yeah.
Brings me no joy whatsoever.
I'm so upset. I'm still going to wear it. I put a lot of work into carving that yard ornament into something that I could wear on my head and also not decapitate myself with.
Oh, man. Larry, so, Cody, I don't know if you know this. Larry has always wanted to find a pumpkin that he could wear on his head like Dwight does in that episode of The Office.
But
and he finally found it.
Pair it with a David Pumpkin suit. And now...
Which he purchased last year.
Fortnite has ruined it.
Fortnite put out the exact skin. It's so good. How are you doing, Larry? Outside of that.
Oh, pretty good. It's my favorite week of the year, so here we are.
You got big plans. You don't do the pranking stuff so much anymore now that you have a daughter. And
I mean, I do. It's just it's less. I put less into it. This year there's going to be a little more put into it. I bought a spider web to hide behind, but but actually for the last couple of years I've been hiding somewhere in my yard dressed like Slender Man. And after the kids get there, so the kids go through my yard and don't see me. And then once they get their candy from my wife, when they turn back around, all of a sudden Slender Man's standing in the yard.
Okay, that's pretty good. Yeah. That's pretty good.
This year, I'll just be jumping out of things. I'm trying to figure out how to rig it up so I've got it so my pumpkin head can light while my head is in it. And I want to have it looking like it's setting by my porch. But then once the kids get close, I stand up and there's a person inside this pumpkin.
That's a brilliant idea. Cody, what are you going trick-or-treating as this year?
A shut-in.
Are you doing anything for Halloween? Did you go do any parties this weekend, anything like that?
I have a party planned this upcoming weekend. I haven't put that much effort into Halloween the past few years just because I don't have the time. And this year I just didn't have the inclination.
Nice. So after Halloween, that's not really a Halloween party, though.
It was the soonest we could do it.
Okay. So are you dressing up?
There's a theme at the party. The theme is Disney animated characters.
Yes.
And I refuse to dress up as a Disney character on principle. So I'm just going to go as myself, or I'm just going to go as someone completely unrelated.
So really there's only one thing you have, like one option that you have, and that is to work your entire life to live a life worth a Disney movie being made about so that you become a Disney character and then your costume retroactively fits into the theme.
Exactly. That's what I'm building my life towards.
Aren't we all? This is PvA Radio. We get together every week. Each of us brings the three biggest stories in gaming news to the table and then have an in-depth discussion about it. Take all of what I just said, toss it out the window, because that's not what we're doing this week, boys and girls, because it is the Halloween Spooktacular. Larry, that's where you're supposed to hit the sound effect.
That's just an old man having a heart attack.
Yeah.
That was a death rattle.
Yeah, that's the idea. What greater horror is there than dying alone?
Oh, gosh.
Too real.
Man. You can find us on podcast services everywhere with new episodes posting every Tuesday. If you want to be a part of the show, visit playerversusall.com/PVAQ. More on that later. As I mentioned, this week, housekeeping, Halloween Spooktacular. We're going to be talking about some horror topics that each of us has prepared. Some of us much more recently than others.
That's accurate.
Also, we are going to go ahead.
What's funny with mine is I prepared it weeks ago, but I didn't remember to actually drop it in the show notes till this afternoon.
Classic Larry.
Other news, we're going to start streaming our episodes soon. Hopefully in the next couple weeks. I need to make it out to Larry's to get him set up to do it on his end. He's the most prepared to handle the streaming side of things for us.
It's a lot of pressure.
But if you want to prepare for when those times are, you can go follow us on twitch.tv/PvA Radio. We will be streaming every Monday at 9 p.m. over on that channel, which is when we record our episodes live. You can interact with us in the chat there, drop us a follow, finally see how attractive Cody is, despite the fact that half his face is covered by this giant microphone that he has. In a couple weeks, Cody, not this week. Don't reveal it yet. Also,
that was just
here's
for you
Edgar.
guys.
For those of you who are uninitiated, this is my new cat, Edgar. Have you seen this thing yet, Larry?
I haven't.
So
now,
before the go ahead.
If you were starving and you had to eat one of the cats, which one would you eat first?
Definitely the orange cat because he's a lot fatter. So, also he likes to walk across the keyboard and stuff. So when I was while we were waiting on you, Larry, I went back to grab something from the bedroom, and this cat jumped up on the table, and Cody was like, when I got back, he was like, "There was a black cat that was just hanging out on your table," and I looked at him, really confused, and was like, "I don't own a black cat."
Like, I am losing my goddamn mind.
Oh, man. Also, you can find our episodes available on YouTube from now on, same time as the podcast publishes live Tuesday mornings. You can find that. I'd give you the link, but we don't have enough followers yet to have like a cool custom link. So I'll give you that as soon as we have it. I'll link it in the description if you're listening to this on audio, but prefer YouTube. So, all right, let's start the show like we start every show with what have you been playing? Larry, what have you been playing? I got to go check and see if the oven's cut off.
Tell me, Larry, what have you been playing?
All right. I've been playing Junkenstein's Revenge on Overwatch. That's been moderately fun. But much more importantly, I've been playing the Fallout 76 Break Everything Break Everything test application. Yeah.
How's that been?
I really enjoyed that. I'm more of a social gamer. Like, I like playing stuff with friends. I was a little concerned about how it would work in a Bethesda game, though. But I really enjoyed it. It's the same Fallout. I mean, it is a Fallout game through and through. The same kind of quest, the same kind of world. The difference is this world actually has some beauty in it. That's something that's been sorely lacking from Fallout games.
Yeah.
Have
you been playing it with someone?
No, I've been playing by myself.
As the social gamer.
As the social gamer. But, like, you run into people all the time in the world. And the social component is really neat. There is proximity voice. So, like, one dude,
nice.
I ran across this guy who was in the middle of a event quest that he had no idea what he was doing, and I had no idea what I was doing, and we were able to talk and help figure it out. So that was neat. The way the social stuff works is really cool. Anyone you come across, you can trade with. You can invite them to team up if you guys want to do that, or you can attack them. And I love how that system works. If you attack somebody out in the wild, you do half damage until they reciprocate, and then it's full on damage. Whoever kills the other person first wins. But if they don't reciprocate and you keep dealing half damage, once you kill them, you get marked as a murderer. And I don't know what that actually does. Next time I play the game, that is my main objective. I'm going to murder somebody and find out.
And he's not talking about on the game, ladies and gentlemen.
Correct.
It is Halloween.
But I've had a blast with it. I got to fight feral ghouls on top of the New River Gorge Bridge, and it's a fun game. I love Bethesda games, and I'm going to love them even more with friends if I get
How
into
does I have a lot of questions about this game, but how does the West Virginia setting, do they actually capture it well?
I think so. And one of the things that makes the game beautiful is there's kind of an autumn. The season is autumn and the trees are beautiful. It's not all the same color, and that's one thing I really miss about living in West Virginia this time of year. Like West Virginia is beautiful in the fall. I got a little confused navigating the river. I was trying to follow the river down, and I couldn't find the river. And I'm like, I am under the New River Gorge Bridge. There should be a giant river here. And finally, I figured out this is the riverbed. The river is gone because of the nuclear apocalypse. But yeah, I haven't come across anything besides the bridge where I'm like, wow, I've been here, but I haven't gone to any of those areas yet. I take that back. I went to Charleston, the capital, and it was reminiscent of the real place. But the potholes in the roads need to get a lot bigger before it's realistic.
Where are you at on that game, Cody, in terms of interest level?
I have absolutely no interest in it.
Oh, okay.
It sheds all
Good
the
discussion.
stuff that I like about Bethesda. Sorry. That made it sound really curt. But it just kind of, at least looking at it, it sheds all the stuff that interests me about a Bethesda game. So I don't know, it's just not for me. I can understand why people are into it, but it's just not for me.
Mm-hmm. I did say, I was talking to Luke earlier this week, the one problem I have with the social aspect is in Fallout games, you get a lot of the story through reading and listening to things left behind by people who died in the nuclear war. And that's still the case. And it's going to kind of be difficult to do that while running around with friends if they're not interested in learning what happened.
So part of the kind of setup of the online, and you probably won't be able to speak much to this because it doesn't sound like you really built anything with other people, but part of what Todd Howard talked about was that when you exit the server, kind of everything that you built goes with you, so that nothing you built gets destroyed while you're away. Mm-hmm. So let's say I'm to build like me and you, we get together, we build this just gigantic compound, and you back out of the server and I stay in. I'm wondering, and maybe you can speak to this, but is it saved as a party or is it saved as individuals? Like the part that you built will go away with you? I
actually don't know, since I haven't really teamed up with anybody yet in an official sense. Mm-hmm. I had that unofficial team up with that dude, but we didn't click the button.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of potential for this game to have some really cool features. And you and I spoke about this a little off the air a couple days ago, but just the idea of if they were to introduce custom servers, which I don't believe have been announced yet, but where you can actually kind of get in and role play and mm-hmm. create different scenarios. Like we were talking about, I think it's called Bridge Day. What's it called?
Yeah, that's it. Bridge Day.
Where they take the New River Gorge Bridge and it's just like a bunch of vendors and games and stuff. And so it would be cool to organize as a community to gather a bunch of stuff and say, we're going to go have a big trade day over on the bridge. And I think it would be cool to have a server option to be that they are persistent, mm-hmm. the stuff that you build stays with you. But if it's a private server, there's kind of gentlemen's agreements, and maybe you've got the law that tries to hunt you down if you do something to someone's stuff. Yeah. I just think there's a lot of cool potential for role playing in that world. I think Bethesda makes really cool sandboxes of games that you can get in and explore and get lost in outside of just the general gameplay. And I think if you connect with the right kinds of people in this game, it could really it could be something kind of unique and special. I can see why somebody who's really all about like the way Bethesda makes games being a little hesitant to want to jump into this, but I think they're after something that can be pretty unique.
Yeah. And I know I've already talked about it, but my favorite feature of this game is the proximity chat. Like, that used to be kind of standard in games, and as people grew more toxic and more people went into party chat, it kind of got removed. And so I'm really glad to see it make a comeback, especially in a game like this. It's just so interesting. I hid in a bush and just listened in on a couple of guys having a conversation and decided to just stay there. It was real creepy, but I just hid in the weeds and they never became aware of me.
That's your role play.
Yes. It's just like me in real life. Just
That's why he bought that pumpkin head, so he can just look like a pumpkin on a porch, but he's just listening to everybody's conversations.
He can be his real self.
All right, Cody, what have you been playing and watching and all that sort of stuff?
I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2 to no one's surprise pretty much. I don't want to say nonstop because I don't think I've played in the grand scheme of things that much because this game is so huge. I think my completion percentage is about 30%, but I don't think that's indicative of how much time I've put into it because I've spent countless hours doing things that don't really contribute to completion. I really, really like the game, and I'm also very aware of the fact that I think the game is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I've been fascinated by the conversation on Twitter and just between critics about this game because it's not a game that concedes a lot to you. It very much wants you to get on its wavelength, and if you're not willing to do that and engage with it on its own terms, then you're probably not going to like it. It's slow. I think slow is the wrong word. It's deliberate and methodical, and it relishes the small details and minutia of living in the world, and that means things might not always be quote unquote fun as you would consider to be fun in a game. But at least for me, I'm enjoying just living in that world and every little thing making me feel like I'm more connected to that world on a very tactile level. I mean, it's a gorgeous world, and I'm super into how the narrative is being told, despite the fact that it's sort of directionless at the point that I'm in. But the characters are fascinating enough that I'm super into it, and the world is just one that I'm willing to engage with on its own terms. And so I'm loving it so far.
Yeah, so I've been playing it too, so it's a cool time. One of the rare opportunities we kind of get to have a discussion about a new game. And I have to disagree with you. I mean, I think slow is a good word for it. And I don't necessarily know if it's a bad thing at this point. I'm probably about 15 hours in. I don't know what my completion percentage is, but I've played for about 15 hours. And so like the very first mission that you're a part of, like you're trudging through 1.5 feet of snow. And I was like, man, I'm ready to get out of the snow so I can walk a little faster. But you don't. You get out of the snow.
The first 3 hours of the game.
Yeah, you get out of the snow and you walk the same exact speed. And I don't know, man. Like, there's a point to me where it's like I understand what you're trying to do here, but at the end of the day, a game is supposed to be fun at its core. And I think the amount of just traveling that you do and from one place to another, from one mission to another. Like of the 15 hours I played, probably half of that has just been spent traversing the landscape from point A to point B. And as a guy who generally likes to mainline those games or go from mission to mission, I want to be participating in something that's advancing the story or that idea of having to ride for so long from mission to mission is just. My wife was watching me play, and she was like, the reason I can't get into these games is so much of it is just getting to where you need to go. And And I just think to a point when you try to, and I think in a lot of ways this game tries to make it feel like you are living the life of Arthur Morgan, like, and not in the glamorous outlaw way, like, you know, GTA does or whatever, but just like, oh, I have to eat and brush my horse and, you know, cut my hair and take a bath and do all these things so that I don't get treated differently or you know, the other negative effects that can happen. Like, it just starts to bog itself down a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying my time with the game. I'm with you. I think the way the characters are written and the way the storylines are just kind of like, it's got that Rockstar just like quirkiness to the storytelling that keeps you engaged, and it kind of makes the rides to point A to point B worth it. But there are times where I just feel like, man, the traveling in this game is a slog. The fact that they've got and I know a lot of people think this is cool, and I guess it's cooler this way than it is the other choice. But the fact that one of the big features is this cinematic mode where it's just like I can hold down the home button. It puts me in the cinematic mode, and I just hold down A while it gets me from point A to point B and just changes camera angles every so often. It's just like, that to me is indicative of a pacing issue. And I think like games so often have a problem with pace, and just because Rockstar is Rockstar, they think they can get away with something that just completely obliterates its own pace. And to me, the punch just doesn't land.
Yeah, I just couldn't disagree more. Especially, I think a lot of it has to do with, well, one, I don't think this is a game that rewards you mainlining the story. I think the story is great on its own, but if you're not willing to like go off the beaten path when you're going from point A to point B and get intercepted by point C and just go off on this like complete tangent, this is a game full of tangents. Mm-hmm. And some of my most rewarding moments in the game have been just completely dynamic encounters that kind of came out of nowhere or came out of me going off the path from a story mission to a story mission. I think a lot of my interpretation of this game, I would have been interested to see how I received this game had I not been playing Assassin's Creed before it. Because a lot of my experience has been filtered through that lens. Assassin's Creed, everything about Assassin's Creed is every single minute of that game you are doing something. It's fast to get you into the world, it's fast to introduce all these systems, and that's the way most open world games are. There was the same with Spider-Man. And I think maybe it's just where I'm at right now. I just kind of wanted a slower pace, more somber, kind of elegiac game, and that's what I got. So I don't know. I'm digging the chill attitude of the game, despite the fact that it's a very desperate and very wild world that it's set in.
Mm-hmm. I just think a game should reward you for whatever play style you choose, especially like in that kind of genre where so many games, and not that RPGs are designed to be mainline, but they're quest based, you know, like, mm-hmm. you know, go to this point, do some things, go to this point, do some things. And if I choose to play like that, it shouldn't feel like I'm trudging through a foot and a half of snow beyond the first 3 hours of the game. And so to me, it's more just a design flaw in my opinion, where a lot of people may see it as a feature, not a bug. And I just don't like, I want to do outlaw things, you know. I don't want to have to ride my horse through a river because he's caked in mud. Like, I think there's such a thing as too much attention to detail, and I think Red Dead's close to that, close to the line for me. Yeah. So
that's I love that the fact that we're on such polar opposites for this, because that's an interesting thing about this game.
Well, and the thing is, we're polar opposites, but like I'm still enjoying it. I don't think it's my game of the year by any means, but I'm enjoying the game. So, yeah.
And I will say,
go ahead.
I will say I'm enjoying it more than Assassin's Creed.
And
Fair
I'm
enough.
excited about
I'll just leave it there.
The fact that it has cowboys.
Larry's like, can we go back to Fallout 76 now?
Nah, I one day I'll pick this game up. Probably. I know I'm not going to have time this fall between all the other games I want to play.
Fair enough.
You also have something you've been watching on here, Cody.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to quickly put, a shout out to the Netflix Castlevania series, because the second season came out on Friday, and I'm not someone who usually binge watches stuff, but I watched the second season in its entirety over the weekend. It's not long. I mean, they're like half-hour episodes, and there are 8 of them. But that is, by a long shot, the best video game adaptation I've ever seen. Mostly just because it tells... It's a low bar, but it tells a coherent story.
Now I got to wipe tea off my computer monitor, thanks.
But no, more than that, it has great characters, and the writing and the performances are just great. The most interesting thing about it is that it takes Dracula seriously as a character and makes him into more of a tragic figure than just an outright villain. And that makes the story infinitely more interesting, because it could have easily just been a monster hunter, a sorcerer, and a half vampire go up to fight the big bad, and it's a lot more complicated than that. And there's I think I posted about it on Twitter, but there's a scene towards the end of the second season that is absolutely heartbreaking, and Dracula is at the center of it. So I can't recommend that show enough. I've never been super into Castlevania, but you don't really even need to enjoy the show.
Cool. So I've been playing Red Dead as well. We won't harp on that. I'm sure at some point after me and Cody finish it, we should just have kind of maybe a special episode where me and you discuss it. So
yeah, that would be great.
But since it's Halloween time, I wanted to mention I watched The Haunting of Hill House, which is just maybe one of the best shows I've watched in a long, long time.
Wow.
And I'm not saying best horror show. I'm talking full stop best show. Like, the writing is great, the casting is perfect, the atmosphere is wonderful. Cody, even though you're not like a big horror guy, like, it's spooky definitely, and like it's got some jump scares and stuff. But the way the story is told and crafted, it's got like a. So I tweeted out, and spoiler alerts for This Is Us, not the Hill House, the Haunting of Hill House. I tweeted out, crazy to think that Hill House burned down after that slow cooker caught on fire. And it's because it has this really like This Is Us kind of vibe. My wife is a fan of This Is Us, and I catch episodes here and there, and like that whole thing is about weaving a story about how your childhood affects your adulthood. And that's all this show is about as well. It's like, how do the things that happen to us as children impact us as we're adults? And so it's about this family with 5 kids that move into this house to flip it, and all this spooky stuff starts happening, and how it impacts them as they move throughout their adult lives, because a lot of this stuff has been unaddressed. And I don't want to give any more away than that, but we watched all 10 episodes in 2 days. And I told Larry this, and this is probably the highest bit of praise a show can get from me. I wanted to go back and immediately start it over last night when we finished, because I was like, I want to see how all of this stuff connects going back, like stuff you can see on your second watch through. And there's only a handful of shows I've ever done that with, and I've never wanted to do it immediately after finishing them. So
I even have to lie to him about having seen a movie to get him to watch a movie I've seen.
Yeah, I won't even watch stuff with people who have seen it. Like, because and Larry's better about this than most people, but you know how people are like, oh my gosh, this part's gonna be you got to pay attention here. This is a good scene. You know, I just can't handle it.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys, let's hop into our topics.
Hey, wait, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I watched a spooky thing too.
Oh, what did you watch?
I watched that new Sabrina series, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but now it's called
yeah.
The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. because I liked that show when I was a kid. This great lighthearted sitcom. This is not that. It's a very dark, serious show.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to keep watching it. It's not bad. I'm not into it, and it's not even remotely funny.
That makes me want
It's
to
not
watch
what
it
I
more.
want from Sabrina. I know. I knew when I said this, you were going to want to watch it, so that's why I brought it up.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to check it out. So
Someone gets
all
stabbed in the neck and bleeds out in the first episode. It's
Damn, now I want to watch it.
All right, guys, let's move into our topics. We're doing something a little different this week. Instead of doing news stories, we are going to just talk about scary things, horror topics. And so I'm going to kick us off. Fellas, let's talk about Halloween events. As live service games have grown more and more, Halloween events are becoming a bigger thing. Whether it's specific game types or character skins, those sorts of things. So I just want to kick this off. What, in your opinion, are some of the games with the greatest Halloween events that you have participated in?
my favorite, actually, probably is Destiny. I loved their Festival of Lost Souls, I think they called it. And the first year of Destiny 2, they didn't have it. They had it this year, but I'm just not into Destiny right now, so I didn't check it out. But I liked all the side quests of collecting stuff to get these masks, and if you do enough of it, you get these special masks. I don't know. It was neat.
I like the Overwatch Halloween event, although I think they need to do something new with it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually also really liked the Halloween stuff that WoW did, just because it was super goofy and super playful in the way that Blizzard is. And that's what I like about Halloween events, the fact that they give you goodies and that it's super fun and kind of playful, spooky. I can't remember I don't think it was a consistent event across from season to season. But WoW has like a legacy of having really cool, spooky Halloween events.
I've never played WoW, so I'm unfamiliar with these. Yeah, for me, it's Overwatch. Like I look forward to Overwatch's Halloween event every year. It's the only time I'm even tempted to play like the arcade mode for a special event, but not so much anymore because I'm with you, Cody. Like I think the Junkenstein's Revenge. I mean, we've done it for 3 years in a row now. They just keep kind of adding new characters to it and wrinkles, but it's all played on the same map. It's all the same premise. Like, I think it's getting a little stale. But I thought they pulled out a lot of really great stops this year. You know, they had some solid skins. They still don't have an awesome Halloween Diva skin, so I'm a little sad about that. But the fact that they'd like totally reworked 2 maps, to give it a Halloween flair. I don't think they've done that in any of the past seasons, have they?
Yeah, they have. Typically, they do Hollywood, but this year you had Eichenwald. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
They do Hollywood and I think one more usually, but maybe Kings Row. No, not Kings Row. Sorry.
Doesn't Eichenwald change?
Yeah, Eichenwald changes this year. I didn't know if this was the first year.
I wasn't sure if they did that last year.
But with the arcade mode, Junkenstein's Revenge, like I'm with you. The first year they did that, like that may be the first. No, Destiny would have been the first Halloween event I played, but it kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't expect it. I thought it was awesome, and I love like survive wave after wave kind of games. But I have also been disappointed by them not mixing it up. Every other like recurring event, that's not true.
Nah, they bring back like Lucio Ball on the same exact field.
It's always
year.
Mace. But they've mixed up the winter one, and they've mixed up the one where they go into the history of Overwatch. So I would like to see him do something more with this, and especially I kind of expected it this year because last year Jeff Kaplan talked about how they were like, going to amp up some of this story mode stuff, and I guess not yet.
Yeah. So let's see. It's funny. It's hard to think of back to and think of a lot of examples of games that we get excited about because like this is all kind of a fairly new concept, probably outside of games like WoW. But in the console space, like this idea that developers are going to push an update for just a month where you can kind of like engross yourself in Halloween, like is super new. And so in this new world of love service games, as I have in the show notes here. Also, who wrote Bow Chicka Wow Wow right there?
That was me.
Okay, that's what I thought. What games would you like to see a Halloween event in? And let's just kind of talk about what we think a good Halloween event in those games would be.
So the bare minimum to make it a good Halloween event is you got to have skins, and having special skins like makes more sense in this than in anything else because of Halloween costumes. So like that's the most important thing I think for your Halloween event. But I do also like to see like some kind of weird quest secondary thing you can do, like in Destiny, where you were collecting masks and collecting candy and that kind of thing. So yeah, give me the chance to dress up and get candy of some sort.
Yeah, I like the skins and the kind of the reskinned maps. I love that stuff. Yeah, it's thematically relevant to Halloween, and it's especially in Overwatch, it kind of plays into the whole like you're getting goodies kind of thing. I like when Halloween events kind of have that, and Blizzard does this so well, when it has a really playful spookiness about it. That's what I think about Halloween. I don't really associate it with like absolutely outright horrifying stuff. I just think about it as like a chance to get a little playful, get a little spooky. And so Blizzard does that well. They did it well with WoW, and they do it well with Overwatch. And so I love that kind of energy about it. Not every game can fit that, but most games that do end up doing a Halloween event get a little weird with it, which I always love. Rainbow Six Siege they introduce new skins every Halloween. They're always a little bit offbeat.
Does Rainbow Six Siege do any like game mode kind of deal?
They did an event not for Halloween, but they did like an Outbreak kind of zombie-ish event this past March, which I thought would have worked really well for Halloween. So I'd love to see them push it out again. I doubt they will. But that's a franchise that could have a really cool kind of wave-based mode with it. And that zombie mode was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really hard for a lot of games to capture what would make a good Halloween event, like in terms of game modes, because part of what makes good, because to me, I'm the opposite of you on this again, Cody. To me, yes, Halloween can be playful, but the thing I love the most about it is just the horror, the scariness. And so a good Halloween event to me kind of leans into the scariness of something. So, I think part of the reason it's hard to capture something like that is because a lot of these service-based games are bigger in terms of like the world that you're playing in. And so a lot of horror relies on like constricted geography, and it also relies on you being powerless. And so many of those games are just about becoming the most powerful character that you can be.
And these games are meant for as many people to play as possible, and not everybody is into horror.
Yeah. But I think about a game like The Division, and so like one of the big tropes in horror is just that like during Halloween for service, like for people in emergency services, like things get weird, right? You get called out to weird things. And so I think it'd be cool for The Division to just put out a series of like special event missions where you're called out to different kinds of like terrifying things that are going down. Like maybe you're hunting down some sort of mass murderer, or there's some sort of creature that's on the loose that's terrorizing whatever city that you're patrolling. Like, I think there's a lot of cool opportunities there to actually craft like story missions around the event. But I also agree, like having skins is a big deal. Just that's the thing that attracts me to the Overwatch stuff the most is like I said, I don't play a lot of Junkenstein. I like the reworked maps, but the skins are the thing that draw you back. So are there any other like live service games that?
So I've got a few ideas for Fallout 76. That game is going to lend itself to this thing really well, I think.
And Bethesda's the quirky studio to do it.
Yeah, I really hope they do. And it lends itself so well to it because, it's this big open world RPG. You've got the social element, but also the way it's this survival game, but if you die, it's not like permanent, Mm-hmm. And so you can have like some high pressure situations where you die and you're not like upset that the world's so hostile right now, Mm-hmm. So one playful idea I had was it would be cool if people could decorate their camps, like add jack-o'-lanterns, that kind of thing. But then you could like light your camp up and it would show up on the map and people could go from camp to camp and trick or treat basically. And you
could also they could start adding just unique monsters for those events.
Yeah.
Like high level creatures. That'd be cool.
And let me wear masks of them. Give me a Mothman mask, But then I also had a much darker idea.
Here we go.
So on the week of Halloween, people who have been labeled murderers, instead of like doing half damage when they attack, they're actually super powered. And the non-murderers have to band together in their camps and fortify them and survive against Michael Myers style adversaries.
Yeah, I think that would actually be like a cool thing in like Fortnite, where you get dropped in and it's like, hey, there's 5 people who are able to get access to weapons and stuff like that. But the people that get weapons, they have a huge health pool, but they can't build anything. And then there are other characters, that they can get like handguns and they can build really, really fast. And so you have to band together to try to knock out the 5 monsters before they knock out the 95 regular people.
I like that.
Based on how Fortnite operates, though, they would literally just license Michael Myers, and you would be Michael Myers.
That's
I'm
true.
dealing with it.
It would be like how Thanos came into the game,
which I guess was kind of the same.
Which
concept.
was really cool.
Yeah, and really cool. And Fortnite's the kind of, you're right. Like I think there needs to be more licensed event-based things in video games, because I don't think like. There are very few license-based, full-blown video games that I'd want to be a part of. I'd want to play. But if you throw Freddy Krueger in the middle of Fortnite or whatever, and added a really cool mechanic around like that would draw me into it. So yeah, I think more games should take advantage of that sort of stuff around this time.
Yeah. I think. It's not really a live service game, but it's bordering on it. Assassin's Creed Origins did a lot of weird stuff with like crossover events, and Ubisoft is notorious for doing this kind of stuff. Like they had Final Fantasy stuff come into Assassin's Creed Origins. They had the Predator go into Ghost Recon Wildlands. And so I'd love to see some sort of licensed limited time Halloween event next Halloween for Origins. That'd be really cool. They keep these games going for so long that they're essentially live service games. The game that I had on my list was Super Smash Brothers. And I'm under no illusions that they'll never add like Freddy or Jason to a Super Smash Brothers game, although that would be completely rad. But Super Smash Brothers is the kind of game that can get goofy with adding new costumes to characters and adding new characters for Halloween. Like they've already introduced what's his name? Simon Belmont from Castlevania. And they didn't add Alucard or Dracula. They added those as like trophy characters. So next Halloween I could totally see them adding more kind of vampiric characters around the Halloween season. They could kind of retool maps and reskin maps for it. I'd be super. And there's already. I mean, you can essentially create the mode you're talking about in Fortnite and Super Smash Brothers already, just through custom game modes. But if they were to release kind of like just souped up versions of those, if they have sort of custom game playlists, that'd be really cool. Super Smash Bros. Is the kind of franchise that's flexible enough to be goofy on Halloween and not really risk compromising itself. So I'd love to see that.
They really need to add David S. Pumpkins as a playable character.
They do, yes.
And his final smash is he just drives through in the Pumpkin Mobile, which if you haven't seen the animated short, or animated special, the Pumpkin Mobile is a giant strawberry.
I'd love to see them add that Freddy Krueger-esque character from Rick and Morty. What's his name?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
He's just goofy as hell. He yells like really wholesome things. He yells like sex is sacred instead of yelling really terrifying things at people. So I'd love to see that, but it's never going to happen.
Another thing in like during this time of year that other media does, that TV shows do, like I love Halloween specials of shows.
Yeah.
And the greatest Halloween special of all time, and don't at me, all right, is the Boy Meets World episode.
Yes.
Is the Boy Meets World episode where there's the slasher that's hidden in the school with them overnight. I don't remember all the I need to go back and watch that episode. I'm sure it's on.
Guest starred that girl, Jennifer Love Hewitt, right?
I have no idea. I only remember the fact that I took that script, right? I watched that episode a couple times, took the script, and then when I was in elementary school, we like redid scenes of it in a class that I had. But part of it is taking characters that like you love, right, and putting them in situations that they're not normally a part of. And so I wish there was more like Halloween-based DLC stuff, you know, like
Undead Nightmare.
More character driven, I think, than Undead. Well, I know,
like telling alternate universe sort of story, like that Boy Meets World episode.
Yeah, sort of. So
like characters can die.
Yeah, characters can die in them, you know. But it's characters that follow totally different story arcs generally, but you're getting to see them in more of like a horror space. But they get to bring in all their eccentricities and the quirkiness, and if it's a funny game, they bring in like they bring their humor in with them too, because that's like the thing about the Boy Meets World special and so many of those like sitcom specials is that they can tell like decently creepy stories that are cut directly through by the humor of the characters that you know. And so I wish we could see more of that in games, and I don't think it's necessarily possible, just given the amount of resources it takes to develop stuff like that.
Yeah, that's sort of what the Junkenstein's Revenge thing is, and that's what makes it so cool. It's this alternate universe story, but yeah, getting more detailed, getting something, give me some cut scenes, that kind of thing. That would be neat.
Mm-hmm. And I don't remember Undead Night. I don't think I ever even played Undead Nightmare. Is it more of a story-based thing, or is it just a game mode kind of deal?
No, it was a complete story-based DLC.
Okay.
It was a separate side story where John Marston, like, zombies suddenly rise in the Wild Wild West, and you have to fight them as John Marston. You can unlock the 4 horses of the apocalypse as mounts and stuff like that. And it told, like, an actual story through it all. It was cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I should go back and play that.
You definitely should.
There's a youth group game that I would like to see make an appearance in one of these big online service games called Murder. So the way the game works in real life is everyone gets a slip of paper that's folded up, and one of them is marked murder, and then everyone goes and hides. And whenever the murder wants to get started, he just walks up, touches somebody, and whispers, "You're dead." And that person can scream and fall down, but they can't talk anymore. They can't tell anyone who the murderer was. So the rest of the people are trying to figure out who the murderer is before he gets everybody. And that would be real cool, like randomize. One person in this game is able to kill people, but we don't know who it is. We have to figure it out.
That reminds me, and we're off topic here, but who cares? That reminds me of a game we used to play in youth group, which why we had this fixation on death is beyond me. But it was called Wink Murderer. Have you ever played Wink Murderer?
No.
Yeah.
So you get in a circle and you hand out cards, and there's there's 2 aces. The 2 aces are there's 1 ace. The 1 ace is the murderer. Then you have two people who get another card, and they're like the sheriff, and then everybody else is townspeople, right? And so you try to. I'm getting two games mixed up here, aren't I? Wink Murder. I don't know. Wink Murder, you just get a card and everybody has their eyes open. You sit in a circle, lights are real dim, and you try to wink at people inconspicuously.
You're thinking of werewolves.
I know that's not what it was called, but but I'm sure it's one of those games that has iterations of it. That,
like Mafia and stuff like that.
Yeah, Mafia is what the other game's called. But yeah, Wink Murder, one person is a murderer, and you're looking around the circle, and you're trying to inconspicuously wink at people, and if someone gets winked at, they have to like scream and die, and then everybody else tries to guess who the murderer is.
For the record, I was not off topic. I was saying I'd like to see that game happen in one of these video games. Like at the start of the match, it's randomized. One person can kill. But if they do it stealthful, their objective is to pick everybody off before the other team accomplishes some objective to stop them. I don't know what that would be. But
There's a mode in Gmod that is that. It's called Gmod Murder. One person has made the murder at the beginning of the game. Everybody else has to kill the murderer. One person starts with a gun, and if that person shoots someone that's not the murderer, the gun falls out of their hands and their screen goes blank for like 10 seconds. Someone else can pick up the gun. The murderer has a knife, and they can just take out the knife and stab people if the murderer wins if they kill everyone. But it turns into like a game of like paranoia and suspicion.
yeah, that's what I want. I want paranoia and suspicion on Halloween night.
Sorry that I was the one that derailed us and then blamed it on you, lady.
To be fair, it's usually me.
As an apology, I will hand the topic off to you. What is your topic?
That's great. So my topic is, Luke, you and I have been podcasting for years now. We always talk about horror games at this time of year, but I would like to talk about scary moments in games that are not horror games. So I just everyone give me 2 or 3 times where a game got real scary when it was real out of character for that game to do so.
So the first one that comes to my mind, and I think my second one is one of Larry's, so I'll go ahead and let him have it. But the one that comes to my mind is, and it's not scary in like the traditional sense, but all gillied up from Call of Duty, where you're crawling through the field as a parade of soldiers walks over you, and you're trying to stay hidden, and it's pretty much a scripted cutscene, like it's like semi-interactive, but while you're doing it for the very first time, you're like, oh my gosh, there's these enemy soldiers walking directly over top of me and they're going to kill me. And I remember playing that when it first came out, and like my heart kind of beating out of my chest, not knowing what was about to happen. So not a traditional like horror scary, but definitely one of the more intense moments.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking of what Luke was going to say second, I think I might have it on my list too, so I'm not going to say it.
Let's
one
just
of
go
them.
ahead. Let's all say it. It's the flood.
Do you
when
wanna
the
count
flood
down?
shows up in Halo, right?
Yeah.
Cody?
Yep, exactly.
I think Cody is frozen unless he's tricking us with that red glow in his eyes. Can you hear us, Cody?
Oh, sorry. I can. I'm back.
All right.
I got possessed for a second there.
I said, let's just go ahead and say it. It's the flood level of Halo, right?
Yeah, that was what it was.
And it was done so well and so out of nowhere. Like the way you're like reviewing security footage, like it's been this action game nonstop, and then out of nowhere, it's been a straightforward space shooter kill the aliens, and then out of nowhere, you have basically the zombie race.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the best turns in video games. It's fantastic.
And it really brought, by that point in the game, brought some desperately needed variation. In spite of the next level being the library, it just added a whole new element. And what a scary, terrifying creature. This is probably a dumb, nerdy question to ask. Have either of you read any of the Halo books?
No.
It is, if you can get a copy of The Flood, it's worth reading. It basically tells the story of the first Halo game, but the way it describes what happens when an infection form slides its tendril inside of you and takes over your nervous system and just slowly starts beginning to erase your memories and identity, it just adds a whole new layer of how terrifying that race is. I actually had a nightmare about the Flood 2 or 3 weeks ago. Like a really long, detailed nightmare where I was like out in this public place with my wife and my 18-month-old son, and the Flood just showed up and started infecting people, and I was trying to like get my family out.
So, what's another one of yours, Cody? Because I'm having a lot of trouble thinking of them. I've been trying to think all day.
I had the first time you encounter a clicker in The Last of Us. That enemy is just terrifying. Something I had was I know you haven't gone to the DLC in The Witcher, right, Luke?
Yeah, I have not.
And you have not. Okay. I didn't want to misinterpret another one of your yes/no statements.
That one was a lot less clear.
Yeah. But there's a mission, or like kind of a level in the first DLC, Hearts of Stone, where you go into this painted world, and it is kind of the memory of this woman, this spirit, and you enter the mansion, and it's classic kind of haunted house, but filtered through kind of the dark Slavic lore of The Witcher. And so it's kind of just has a general air of creepiness. Things are flying off the wall. There's like rotted food on tables. It just kind of has a general haunted atmosphere. And there's an enemy in that level named the Caretaker. He's kind of like a mini boss, who is he's like a guardian of this painted world. And his job is, he's a caretaker. He takes after the graves and the lawns, and he's a mindless kind of peon. That's his job. And you encounter him, and the first time you encounter him, he just looks like a hooded figure from behind. He turns around, and his face is just smooth, and then where a face should be is just a stitched skin patch, and it's absolutely horrifying. It's like he's been put together with various pieces of flesh, and he's just a terrifying creature. And then you fight him. And he's just like incredibly strong and completely kicks your ass. But that level always stood out to me as like a really interesting change of pace for The Witcher. The Witcher is generally kind of creepy with its creatures, but that was just kind of veering much more over into horror.
One that really terrified me as a child was in Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Oh yeah,
the Re-Dead.
Yeah.
The first time you come across those, like in the destroyed village outside the castle, just it's just such a have you played Ocarina of Time, Luke?
No.
Okay, but they're kind of like
just
these
leave this
zombie-looking
podcast.
they're like zombies. They move slow. But they in the terrible graphics of the time, they just looked like creepy naked people standing around. And if you got too close to them, there would be like this loud screaming noise, and you would freeze. You couldn't move for a few seconds, and then they would just like wrap their arms and legs around you and give you this creepy cuddle. And to this day, I don't know if you can kill those things, because anytime I would see them in that game, I would just run away as fast as I could. I was so scared of them.
One more I just wanted to shout out was I had this on my list as a joke, and then the more I thought about it, the more I thought of how horrifying it is. But have either of you played Bloodborne? I know you don't have a PlayStation, Larry, so you probably haven't.
Yes, I have.
Have you, Luke?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is common to most Souls games, but one of the most terrifying moments of any game I've ever played is moving past a new lantern in Bloodborne. With this is not horrifying in the classic sense, but like if you have 15,000 souls banked up and everything is unknown to you, a lot of the horror of Bloodborne is the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the theme. It's a cosmic horror game. It's about what you don't know and pushing beyond the unknown and finding unknown horrors. And so I always thought that like just pushing past your checkpoint out into the darkness was absolutely horrifying, because a lot of the creatures in that game were actually absolutely monstrous, and I never want to fight them ever again.
Yeah, like I said, I'm having a really hard time thinking of like specific in-game moments, because what you guys got to realize is like a lot of my gaming history growing up, especially, was like just sports games, and the scariest thing that could happen to us is that one of our saves got eaten. You know? Like,
That is scary.
so I don't have any of these moments where I'm like, man, that was just really, really terrifying. So, you guys have any more?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Yeah, throw them on.
So, this will come up from time to time, but one of my favorite games of all time is a not very popular game called Project Breakdown. Namco put it out on the original Xbox, and it's a really crazy sci-fi game. You wake up with amnesia, and someone like time travels you and tries to start telling you who you are, and but she gets interrupted because everything just goes crazy. And eventually you will become this guy with these crazy powers to fight these crazy monsters from a parallel dimension. It's not quite a horror game. It's more of an action game, but they're like, I shouldn't say monsters, but they're these weird people from a parallel dimension. But at the start of the game, you have no powers, and these things are immune to bullets. So for the first little bit of that game, anytime you come across them, all you can do is run away from them. And so there's a whole section of that game where you have to navigate like this burning down building while these creatures are patrolling it, and you just got to get through and without getting caught and try to trap them behind locked doors, that kind of thing. And I love those sorts of things, those scary moments in games where you genuinely can't like you can't do anything. You can't just kill the bad guy. All you can do is run. And then I wanted to also shout out an N64 game, Jet Force Gemini. They've got a whole zombie planet in that game. It's called Tofret, and it's amazing.
Cody looks real confused right now.
Yeah, I just didn't know what to make of that. I've never played that game.
Oh, there's another like common scary time in a non-horror game, and that is anytime you're playing like a one life, like a last man standing mode, whether it's like battle royale or like back in the day when you would play like either Call of Duty or, you know, Halo, where like you're playing one life and being the last man alive.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the reasons I hate playing battle royale games by myself, because it's just that feeling for the entire time. But as that number starts ticking down, like the tension that you're feeling, and then the fear you get, especially if like you get one shot killed out of just nowhere and didn't see where it was coming from, like there's something terrifying about those moments as well. So
I'm glad you brought up battle royale games, because those really do have some horror moments. Like, you are being hunted by a bunch of armed people breaking into your house. It's pretty terrifying.
it's the most dangerous game, man.
How many times have we like come around the corner and scared each other and blown our teammates away?
All right, Cody, what is your topic?
This is my last minute topic. I'm obviously not a huge horror person, but I've played enough horror to be able to answer my question. And my question is, do you guys have horror game pet peeves? Are there just some common elements of horror games that you're just not into, that are just complete turn-offs for you in the genre?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, jump scares are a big one for me. Like, jump scares for the sake of jump scares, because nothing else in your game is scary. Like, I am far more drawn to atmospheric horror and horror with a really chilling mystery involved in it. And when games start to kind of boil themselves down into when can they get a scary face to pop out at you, or have a perfectly timed like sound accent that makes you jump, like that is that's something that's like an immediate turn off for me. And even when it's thrown into the mix of like something that does have good atmosphere, I like horror that is like the slow peeling back of layers as you start to see things that were working that you weren't aware were working before. I say all that, but I do want to mention this. Going back to The Haunting of Hill House, the single greatest jump scare in all of horror history is in that show.
Wow.
I legit thought I was having a heart attack when it happened. Like, I kind of held my chest a little bit when it happened and felt it get a little tight.
You got the vapors.
And
Spoiler alert, it's when the pressure cooker explodes.
yeah, which, Larry, I'm trying to remember if it was you or if it was Diz who thought that the greatest jump scare was in Drag Me to Hell.
It was Diz.
Okay. So there's this scene in Drag Me to Hell where they go to a fortune teller, and it's like, I can't remember. They're at a fortune teller, and there's this really big jump scare. The best jump scare before The Haunting of Hill House, in my opinion, is from the first Insidious, where two characters are talking at the dining room table, and it starts going quicker back and forth.
Yeah.
And then it transitions to the camera, and the red-faced man is behind the shoulder of the woman that's sitting there. That was the greatest jump scare of all time, in my opinion. Now The Haunting of Hill House is the greatest jump scare. So you'll have a mini heart attack to look forward to when you go to watch it. But anyway, generally jump scares are something that really like turn me off to something horror related.
Yeah. For me, it's the tendency of horror games to slip into being action games. And, I mean, just because we have monsters doesn't mean it's a horror. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Super Mario has monsters, but it's not very scary. and for me, the epitome of this was Resident Evil 5. You had this series that was just so creepy up to that point. And even though 4 was very different and a little more actiony, it still was a really creepy game. But Resident Evil 5, it's just a run-and-gun game the whole way through. Just unlimited resources. Third world villagers are dropping huge ammo packs for me. Like, where did this guy get this? Why does he have it? and I know to a point, like, you got to have that kind of thing just for the game to be functional. But if I'm just like, I don't want to feel like Master Chief in a horror game. I want there to be some helplessness, some struggle to maintain hope that I might actually get through this. And I think a lot of modern horror games miss the mark on that, especially in the over saturated zombie genre.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go a step further and say that I think a lot of times just combat in general, like it doesn't even have to be super powerful combat, but I think, PT being one of my favorite horror experiences, like there's no combat in PT. Outlast is a really solid horror experience as well. There's no combat in Outlast. Watching you play Slender was super creepy. There's no combat in Slender.
Yeah.
I kind of like the horror in The Park. Did you watch me stream that game when I played through it?
I did not.
It's got really creepy atmosphere.
Wait, yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah. And there's no combat in that game. Like, so I think the moment you can start fighting a monster and realizing that you can win, like, it's not that scary. That's why I wasn't a big fan of like The Evil Within and stuff like that because of the combat mechanics. I don't want it to turn into like a survival, like I have to manage my inventory and stuff kind of game, because I want to be engrossed in the flow of the actual horror that's taking place, not having to like pause and manage systems.
Yeah. I think we've talked about one of my biggest pet peeves, and it's kind of a function of game design and kind of AAA or AA game design in general, but I hate when horror games are too long, and this is sort of related to what you're saying. I think horror games and actually a lot of horror movies feel like they have to get super loud and super like in your face in the last act of whatever story they're telling. and length for games has a lot to do with this. Like, as I think, Larry, you mentioned this before when we talked about horror games previously. There's a certain point where the mystery fades, and what you're left with is kind of what you're always left with in the end, which is a game you can manipulate. You start to see the seams and the strings, and you can pull at them. And like, this was the case with Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation was way too long, and it was effective for a few hours. But after that point, you learned how to like kite the alien around, or you could start to see where the strings of the alien were. And the strings of the alien in that game were that it could just insta kill you every now and then. And so I prefer shorter horror experiences. That's why there's a game that came out last year, and I'll probably talk about this when we go to the second part of this discussion, but there's a game called Observer, which is like a cyberpunk horror game, and it's a shortened experience, and it's very effective for being that way. Yeah, I just hate when horror games and horror movies tend to drag, and a lot of them, unfortunately, in my experience, do.
I will knock us off. I will derail us a little right now as a great example of that. So years ago, the greatest subreddit of all time was No Sleep. And it was just filled with lots of creepy short stories. And now that subreddit sucks. It just does. And the reason it sucks is because all the stories are like, guess what I found in the box in the back of my closet, part 32. Like, no, I'm not reading 32 parts of your story. This is just droned on. It's not scary anymore.
Yeah, there's a reason that the kind of like birth of the horror entertainment genre is like the campfire story. You know, it's short, it's contained, it has a punch at the end, and there's not enough time and detail to answer every single question. You know, and there was a hook hanging on the car door, like, you know, there's that thing at the end, like one of my favorite, I guess now it would be called a creepypasta. I guess back in the day it was like an urban legend, was the babysitter who keeps getting a call from a menacing voice, and it ends with the call coming from the attic of the house that she's in. And like, it's short, it's concise, it has like this string that gets pulled right at the end and it leaves you hanging in a lot of ways. And so and I think in a lot of horror media, whether it's shows or movies or games, like, there's this tendency to want to wrap everything up with a pretty bow, and that's just not how life works generally. Like,
yeah,
one of my favorite horror movies of recent memory is is It Follows. I forgot the name for a second.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that movie's awesome.
And the best part about It Follows is the ending is so ambiguous of like, what's going on. Like, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this. And it doesn't answer the question of which one it is. And so you're left with all this unresolved tension within it. Like, part of the reason I don't like jump scares is because it resolves the tension in whatever moment that you're in. Like, the music is building, the camera is panning or zooming or, you know, whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, and the tension's gone. Great horror to me leaves that tension in the air for you to dwell on for a while.
Yeah. It should unsettle you and leave you unsettled. Not give you a pat on the head at the end and be like, it's okay, buddy. See, this is what was really going on.
Yeah. There were, I wanted to know if there are like specific tropes too that annoy you, because I had like a list here. I put slowly opening ghost doors, which I think you both know what those are. I'm also sort of tired of the PT-ification of horror, which is to set your game in a suburban house, a surprisingly detailed suburban house. I'm also just tired of the scary little girls or scary female ghost trope. That's been beaten into the ground forever. Are there any like small little things like that you just see over and over again that you're just tired of?
we touched on this a couple weeks ago with the zombie thing because I love zombie stuff. But I think that the post-apocalyptic genre has I don't find that atmosphere scary anymore. If I ever did, there's nothing left to lose. Everything's wasted. So who cares?
I'm sure there are I didn't think super specific story related tropes. I'm sure there's tons of them that annoy me. I'm easily annoyed if you haven't figured that out yet. But no, I agree with the ghost stories and the whole this translucent woman standing at the end of a hall,
Yeah.
And it is a lot. I think you put it perfectly, that PT-ification. There's just this trying to grasp at what made PT so good. But what made PT so good is that it dropped and nobody knew what the hell it was. And
it was a complete mystery.
Yeah. So to develop something that is a spiritual successor to PT, you already aren't a spiritual successor to PT because I know about its existence before I can download it. I don't think I have very much to add to what you said, but so we'll just leave it there.
Yeah. And so I guess I kind of conceived this discussion as a likes and dislikes of the genre. And so I kind of wanted to end it talking about what are some things that you'd like to see more of in modern horror? We've obviously talked about the things that annoy us about it, but is there anything you'd like to see more of? Maybe a specific subgenre of horror, or a specific setting or a specific mechanic that you'd like to see utilized more in modern horror games?
Yeah, so we've kind of touched. So my big pet peeve was horror games turning into an action game. And I think that gets resolved in the game mechanic category. Stop making horror games about sending a bunch of bullet sponges at the protagonist. There is almost no setting in the world where you're going to find hundreds and hundreds of bullets laying around, and especially the settings that most of these horror games take place in. Society collapsed 30 years ago. Who's making all these bullets? I'm in one farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. All right, I'll find a couple of shotgun shells, but where did this Uzi come from? Get all that stuff out. Force me to survive with whatever I can find in that environment. Make me confront the enemy that way. And if I can't take him out with it, make me use my ingenuity to escape. Or if you are going to have combat, make it creative like Alan Wake, where it's all about you got to shine the light on these creatures so you dissipate the shadow and then you can hurt them, that kind of thing. But even then, I don't want to be able to walk into a room full of creatures and take them all out. Let me wound them enough to escape or something like that. I want more realistic, more fingernail biting tension kind of combat encounters.
Yeah, I think for me, I want to take that realism thing a step further. I want to see more horror games that don't lean back on a supernatural crutch in order to explain its story. I'm super into true crime stuff too, and the reason it is because I think the things that human beings are capable of are insanely terrifying, and so a story that feels like it has all of these supernatural elements to it that only ends in you discovering that no, that's just people perpetuating these acts. To me, that's super unsettling. I think back to the first season of True Detective. True Detective felt like it was kind of moving in this direction of oh, there's going to be some sort of supernatural element to it. And it's no, there's just really terrifying people in this world that are capable of doing really awful and heinous things. And so if it's I like the detective trope and you're somebody who's investigating these crimes, but kind of subvert it a little bit to where it's you're a skeptic. There's so a big thing in horror, right? Is oh, there's actual supernatural things going on, but there's this one character who just is not willing to admit that it's anything supernatural, yada yada. Like, I'd like to see that subverted, and that's the same dynamic that we have, but at the end, the person who has been skeptical and thinks that there's a logical explanation is proved to be right, but it doesn't make you feel any better, because it's like, oh, for people to have been able to do this sort of stuff, like, I'd have felt better if it was some sort of like supernatural being that did it. I think that's something I'd love to see.
Yeah, I actually had that on my list. We've seen in the past few years that horror films have. I mean, horror has always been a genre that has something to say, and a lot of the blockbuster horror films we've gotten in the past have just been like spooky haunted house stories or kind of just generally scary films. But some of the scariest films in the past few years are films that there might be a supernatural element to, but the horror comes from what's inside of us all. Like Get Out is terrifying for a number of reasons. And not all of it has to do with the weird sci-fi stuff that is in that movie. It's the very real plausible racism that's in the film. So I'd love to see horror games start to actually have stuff to say, because games are increasingly becoming more involved in these discussions. I'd love to see horror become a part of that discussion too.
And to interject there, as far as horror goes, I feel like the movies for a really long time, like horror has always been the genre that often has the most to say.
Yeah, that's where zombie films started.
Yeah. So bring that into the games. I'm with you there, yeah.
I'd also just like to see there are subgenres of horror that I'm much more into than I am into the haunted house kind of stuff. I talked about Observer before, but that game is fantastic. It's a cyberpunk horror game, which is not a common genre generally, but there's so much about cyberpunk that is horrifying, and most of it is body horror, and kind of the psychological implications of that. So I'd love to see more stuff like that. I'd also I love Southern Gothics, and when that starts to lean more into the horrifying aspects of like a horrifying family drama, I love that stuff. That's why I liked the setting of Resident Evil 7 more than most of the settings of the other games, just because like that rural shit just freaks me out as someone who has lived mostly around cities, and specifically the rural South, which sort of solves your problem of where do you get all those bullets? If that's a question you have, there's your answer.
Well,
but yeah,
we live in the rural South, and depending on which farm you find yourself on, that's not necessarily the case. It's a little overblown.
There are bullet farms.
It's true.
Yeah, there's a couple that I would like to see. The first is more of a setting thing, but like more of like the Salem witch trials era.
The Witch is a horrifying.
Oh gosh, that's one of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah,
I hate that movie because it's too good at being evil. Like it was not a bad movie. It wasn't made poorly. It was done too well, and I never want to see it again.
And that's the exact movie I had in mind when I was talking about this. Like, because I do think that like you can introduce some of the supernatural stuff into that, and it fits better than it fits today. Because now there's just so much skepticism surrounding that sort of stuff, whereas that was kind of a part of the way that people viewed life during the Salem. Well, it was a part of the way that they viewed life. They killed a lot of people because of the way that they viewed life in those days. So that's one. Then it kind of devolving in seriousness. One of the most fun horror movies of all time is a movie called You're Next, which is basically an adult version of Home Alone.
Yes.
And I love that idea of like, okay, I'm not powerless to the people that are trying to break into my house, but I also am not armed to the teeth in order to defend myself. Basically like a puzzle game, you know, like I've got to figure out how to use common items in my home in order to in order to defend myself. So that's the second one. And then the third, I just want like a freaking Scooby-Doo game, guys. Talking about playful horror. Like, I just think that Scooby-Doo was such a smart show with like its comedy and the way that their mysteries kind of unraveled by the end of it. And I just think that would be a really fun universe to have a video game in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That second idea you mentioned would make for a really interesting multiplayer horror game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It could kind of operate like Rainbow Six Siege does. Because the killer set traps outside just as well as the girl was setting traps inside. Mm-hmm. Then you got a nice little cat and mouse game going. I know you've seen it, Luke. Have you seen Cabin in the Woods, Cody?
I have, yeah. Like,
I've always thought that would be a great game, just in terms of, again, like a multiplayer game, but you've got an asymmetrical multiplayer game. So you've got one person who's like controlling the cabin area, and he's restricted to rules. Depending on what the people stumble into the cabin he's set up for them he can release certain things, but the people have to try to survive it. And I think that it's very complicated, but as these games are getting more complicated and being able to handle the choices of the user, I think we're getting to a point where that might be a feasible kind of game to make.
Yeah, the only other thing I had to add was a mechanical thing. I love when horror games use your senses against you and really limit your senses. We've seen that a lot with sound. And I love... There's a game I played at the Boston Festival of Indie Games this year called Perception, which I think has some of the development team from Irrational Games and the original BioShock. Don't quote me on that, but it's very much about you're a blind woman and you navigate sort of and perceive things through that lens, and so things are kind of like in a shadowy outline. You don't really perceive things with sight. It's more of like an echo and an outline. So I'd love to see that make its way into a horror game. I think limiting the players what they can see could make for a really frightening experience.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome.
I ain't got nothing else.
All right. Well, let's move on to everybody's favorite game that we play at the end of this podcast. There's too many games, but this isn't one of them. So let's remind the folks at home how this game works. I have 4 games listed here. 3 of them are real. 1 of them is fake. Cody and Larry are going to be tasked with figuring out which one is fake. If they guess correctly, they get a point. If neither of them guess correctly, I get a point. Let's remind the viewers at home what the score is. Larry has 2 points. Cody has 2 points. I have 2 points. All squared up at 2.
Oof.
All right. You guys ready to play?
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right. Game number 1, Sports Party. Sports Party brings the sun, sea, and sports right to your fingertips. Whether at home or on the go, challenge your family and friends to frisbee, jet ski, basketball, golf, skateboarding, and beach tennis to claim victory. Number 2, Gal Metal. One night, while on his way home from school, a high school boy is abducted by the Octoids, an extraterrestrial species bent on revenge. The boy's soul is transplanted into a high school girl's body in a sinister experiment. Now, sharing a body, the duo must work together with her high school band, KMG, to defeat the aliens with their greatest weakness, metal. 3. Dead Climb. Dead Climb has a very simple premise. You are a dead person with ragdoll physics that is trying to climb up and out of some pit or cliff face. 4.
That's it. Okay. This is a very simple premise.
4. Monk Moose. You can lead a horse to water, but a moose is a totally different story. In this co-op puzzle game, you must lead your monastery's thirsty moose to the meandering banks of the Meadows Brook. All right, so we have Sports Party, Gal Metal, Dead Climb, Monk Moose. Larry, we're going to start with you this week. Which one of these games is not real?
Gosh. Okay. I believe gal metal is real.
That's Japanese as hell.
I believe. What's the game with the ragdoll pit thing?
Dead Climb.
Dead Climb. I believe that's real, and I want to play it. But I'm torn on the simplicity of Sports Party. Or what is the fourth one?
Monk Moose.
Monk Moose. That sounds like something you would make up, but there's always a decoy that sounds like something you would make up. So I think that's the thing that you decoyed us with. But so does Sports Party. I don't know. Monk Moose.
Codsworth.
Whatever the fake game is, I really want to play the other three.
Even Sports Party?
I'm hoping Sports Party is the fake one. I'm going to guess against all of my better instincts. I'm going to guess, what was the second one?
Gal Metal.
Gal Metal. I have to go for it, even though I think it's probably real.
We do have a winner this week. The winner is Larry. Monk Moose is not a real game. So let me ask you this, Cody. Were you going to pick Monk Moose, and then when Larry picked it, you just wanted for the sake of parody?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Dang it. I try so
I'm very
hard.
excited to go play gal metal and Dead Climb.
I took out the name.
Dead Climb is totally real.
I took out the name of the band in gal metal because it gave it away that it was not made up. the abbreviation is KMG. I cannot remember what the name is, and I can't venture to go look it up right now. But yeah,
Korean metal gals.
no, it was something way crazier. So, but yeah, Sports Party. Pick it up this week. All right.
No, thank you.
All right, guys, let's get out of here. Who are you? What are you going to be tweeting about? Larry, who are you?
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at LarryHuntsZombies, and I'll be tweeting about Halloween all week because it's Halloween week. I don't care that it ends in the middle of the week.
All right, Codsworth.
I'm Cody. You can find me at ProElectioneer on Twitter. I probably won't be tweeting about Halloween, but I will be tweeting more about Castlevania.
All right. I'm Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at TK from Antioch. And this week, I'll just be tweeting 1.5 hour long videos of me riding from one mission to another in Red Dead Redemption. This is PvA Radio. We get together every week and talk about the 3 biggest stories in gaming news and then push it out to you with an in-depth discussion. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article. Get it tattooed somewhere on your body. If you want to ask us a question, go to playerversusall.com/PVAQ. Submit your question. Also, drop us a follow on twitch.tv/PVA Radio as well. We're going to start live streaming our episodes here soon. Until next week, though, we love you.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.